It's great to be here. I can't wait to talk more about this campaign, which is really good.
Programming. My intention is to bring my experience as well.
I would have moments where I would just not be okay around people.
As a social worker, I have always wanted to impact people and help.
Some of our young people get trapped in that pipeline at 16.
Has a mental health disorder and or diagnosis. When he or she has an episode, like they're not even conscious.
Too, to see, okay, how are we taking care of these human bodies behind bars?
Let's invest in people and not prisons. Welcome back to the podcast. We have the honor and pleasure of having William Garland with us tonight. And William Garland served 24 years of incarceration, started when he was 19 years old. He's presently been on parole for 22 years and is a resident at the Redemption Center. So, Will, give us a little bit of background on you and your story.
Well, I just want to thank everyone for having me today. And I thank you, Mark, for the inclusion. My story is this. I'm from out of Westchester County, New York, grew up in the suburbs, family of 5, father and mother were blue-collar workers, and 3 girls, 2 boys. And I was a little bit rambunctious when I was younger, getting into stuff. So, my father tried his best to, curtail it, but, I just got out of hand. So as I grew up in a Black Italian neighborhood, there was a lot of kids that were older than me, and I stayed with the older guys. So for my age, I was really immature, but I was trying to be mature and hang out with these guys. And it was the smoking cigarettes and drinking and stuff like that and smoking pot. And then, the years kept going, and I was a little bit more older, and I was asked to participate in a crime that I had never did before, a robbery. And unfortunately, the robbery went wrong. The man was hit in the head with a blunt instrument, and he died from it. From that one of the youths that was involved in the crime pointed his finger at me, and then I was arrested, and I never really included him or the other guy that was involved through the auspice of learning at a young age that you don't snitch. But anyway, so I was arrested and contained. I went to trial, lost, and was prepared for them to send me to the prison systems, New York State Correctional System. So I hit the New York State Correctional System at 19 years old. Now, as I stated that, I had already been drinking and drugging because pot is a drug, but this, that, and the other. So I went in with, having did those things or used those substances and stuff. So I went into the system. I acclimated pretty good in the realm of I got my GED, I got an associate's degree, started a bachelor's degree, but I'm out of the percentile that finished my bachelor's degree on the outside through Mercy College in Dobbs Ferry, New York in 2005. But back to my story, while in prison, and oftentimes the picture isn't depicted right, but there's drugs and alcohol in prison. So you would think that through all this trouble that I went in that I would just stop, but being emotionally distraught, not knowing how I was going to get through all this time, I swayed to use drugs and alcohol in prison to cope. Well, that wasn't the best, answer, but that's the reality of it. So I was subject to three parole board, deuce, 2, 4, 6. I got hit. I brought them my original 18 years of life was held. Brought them 20 was held. Brought them 22 was held, and they released me on the 3rd board. which was 24 years. As to acclimating, coming home into society, I was married also while in prison, but I had divorced, but I wound up going home to a woman that stayed with me all those years and was my ex-wife. So I went home to Brooklyn, New York. I acclimated. I followed parole rules and regulations and did what I had to do, and sought work. And the transition wasn't that hard for me. And I'll just bring it back to the education that I had acquired in prison. I point my finger to that, and I salute all those that are involved with educating prisoners, because that's what saved me, the education. So time went on, and I was doing okay, but then I started back using again. And there was no treatment or anything. There were times where the parole would say, you're not working, you're not doing nothing right now, go to this program. And they were drug programs, and the attention that you got there, I mean, there were some concerned people, but really, to me, you needed one-on-one counseling, and anyway, time went on, but I erred in 2007 with a dirty urine.
Explain what a dirty urine is.
Okay, I reported to Bronx Parole, and I had left Brooklyn and I was in the Bronx. I was in Bronx Parole when I caught the first violation. So when you go in, they test you with their testing apparatus for mainly the first things that they used was just like opioids, cocaine, and marijuana. So I gave them a urine that had marijuana in it, and it was deemed a dirty urine. So I got penalized for that. Now, because of me having second-degree murder, I'm in the violent felony category. And what that brings forth is that what you get, there's categories of the penalization. So I got 2 years, and everybody was saying, that's too much. How are you going to get 2 years for dirty urine? But the category had changed. You could get up to 5 years being in the violent felony category. I did the 2 years. I came home and went to work. 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 5, 6 years later, I had another dirty urine for the same substance, marijuana. And, marijuana, cocaine. And I was given 97 days at Willard for that because of there had been some years in between that last violation. So I wasn't really one for, giving parole a hard time, but the essence of it is that I was still using. And again, that 97 days at Willard was like a boot camp. There were some sessions, I would say, that they give you where the ASAT or the KSAT guy would come and hold these meetings and get you to read and stuff like that. But again, what should have probably been better was a one-on-one counselor to help you with whatever problem you had. But also, too, I was just amongst the cluster of violators. So you violate and you do your time, So thus, since 2015, I've had no problems with it until, I'll say, not with the correctional system, but when my sister passed from the COVID, I started drinking very heavily to kill the pain of losing her, so to speak. And I got myself together and I went into long-term treatment. I went into long-term treatment here in Suffolk County, Long Island. I stayed a year, graduated, and I've had no problems since. I have an AA sponsor. I do AA. I really do AA, NA, and I do church to manage myself. And that's at best. But in essence, I'm doing it on my own, so to speak,
And Will, I want to go back a little bit.
Sure.
When you and your friends committed this offense, were you guys using? Were you intoxicated?
Yeah, I was under the influence of beer and marijuana when it happened.
Did during the course of your arrest, the arraignment, pre-trial, did you ever disclose that to your attorney or to anyone?
No.
Why not?
Well, remember my age, and then also too that I was uneducated as to what you're asking me, of me possibly telling them, but also too, the lawyer that my family hired, he didn't put me on the stand, and I wasn't able to tell my side of the story because with that piece of innocent until proven guilty. But we got to remember this was back in the 70s, and things were a little bit different. But no, there was no sharing of that. That might have been in the police report, but not through the court part.
Did you tell the police that you was drunk or high, or why would it go
No,
in there?
no.
So you never told anyone you was under the influence during the commission of this particular crime?
Right. Now let me correct myself. I did dialogue with the lawyer, because I got sentenced to second-degree murder unintentional. I remember that word, unintentional. That was listed on the charges. But no, I didn't say anything.
So during the course of your 24 years of incarceration, did you ever tell any of the counselors that you were intoxicated during the commission of that crime?
No.
Do you think that you would have committed that crime if you weren't intoxicated?
Right.
Do you?
I believe that the intoxication prompted me to go along with the scheme, but had I been sober, I believe I wouldn't have participated.
Okay. Since you've been inside, have you ever got any treatment for, again, your stress or trauma, or have you ever had any diagnoses, any mental health diagnoses?
What I'm going to share about the mental health piece is this, is that as a youth, and I'm looking back and to answer this, back then when people acted erratic or something, they used Thorazine to calm the situation. And I had a fear of acting out and doing things because I didn't want to get doped up, because that was what their cure for it was. It wasn't like they came and talked to you or something like that. They shot you up. They took you down and gave you a needle. And I remember that, vividly. So when you go to the parole boards now, let's remember, you have to go see a psych before you go to the parole board. And it depends on what psych you get. So those boards that I went to, I had like 3 different psychs. And they asked the same questions, but also, too, they also played mind games to get you to say something that you didn't want to say. So I was always staunch, as my mother raised me, to to speak forward. And I wouldn't fall into that, what they said, because one psychiatrist was trying to get me to say it was my mother and father's fault for what happened to me. No, you leave my mother and father out of this. That was my decision. I made a wrong decision. My mother and father loved all their 5 children the same, and it wasn't because of them. It was because of me.
And the second psych?
The same questions, but also they were pushing for you to, if you remember with the parole boards, they want to see your, what's the word? Your guilt. I mean, what's the word, Mark?
Remorse?
Your remorse. That's what, yeah. They want to get you to show your remorse.
And how did they get you to do that, if they did?
By talking about the crime, by talking about the crime. But now, talking about the crime, but now you're adding stuff. I didn't go for that. Like on one of those occasions, they were trying to indicate that my mother and father were responsible for what happened. No, they weren't. It was me, And on the mental hygiene piece, I just thank God for where it's at right now. A lot of the legislature that changed for inside. I was on a maintenance crew, and I went around the facility fixing things. We went to the mental hygiene unit in Sing Sing. where there were men in cells with feces all over the place and urine, and they weren't being adhered to. And I'll never forget that, you know. And it was sad. And I would always tell the civilian, I don't want to go over there. Say, come over here, we got to go oil some doors or something like that, or do something physical, because it was just unbelievable of how these men were being treated with that condition. So as time moved on, it's been addressed. There's organizations that I believe, that I know, that were part of changing the mental hygiene law. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like that.
So, Will, let me ask you this question. Mm-hmm. In lieu of the fact that you were incarcerated for 24 years, you basically were intoxicated, meaning under the influence of, substances. Mm-hmm. Do you think that treatment would have been a better fit for you as opposed to going to jail for 24 years?
Sure, yeah. But the realization of it is that back then, a lot of things weren't in motion towards that. It was the what do you call it? The when you just penalize the person. It was more like penalization than anything talk of treatment, But yeah, it should have been. I mean, looking back on it, yes, there should have been a better examining of me to see what made me tick and what happened, instead of just throwing me into the system. Not saying that I have no regard for the life that was taken, so I always give heed to that. But there were many men like me. There was other youths too that were thrust into that, and we all went through the same thing.
So while you were incarcerated, did you ever get any type of therapy from a counselor or psychiatrist inside?
No, and I'm going to share this out of no disrespect. Those people that were psychiatrists that I knew that some of my buddies would see due to whatever their diagnosis was or whatever, and I share again, back then the main thing they was giving they were giving Thorazine, and I can't break down the whole thing about it, what it's used for. I know from what I saw, it was used to shut you up and keep you quiet, and it was sad because they did that to you, and they had you right in population, being with guys that were dragging, and the officer yelling, "Hurry up! Come on, hurry up!" or whatever. But they're so doped up, they don't even have to know what's going on. Yeah.
So you actually never received any type of counseling while inside?
Right. Mm-hmm.
You only saw a psychiatrist after how many years?
18 years.
And
that was my first parole board. So.
Okay, so you had to go before a psych.
See the psych before you go to the board, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Since you've been out, have you received as parole, anyone tried to connect you with any mental health counseling or treatment?
I was with Samaritan Village in the Bronx. I was working, but I was also doing the program. And a counselor suggested to me, "Will, you need to talk to somebody. You have a lot of bereavement issues because all my, 78 was a bad year. My sister got shot and killed in Harlem. My father died, and then I caught the bid. I got upstate a few years. My brother had AIDS, even though he lasted till I came home. But then my older sister, thereafter, she got AIDS, and it took her quick. So, excuse me. With the sister that got shot and killed in 78, they allowed me to go from the Westchester County Jail to the funeral. My older sister, I didn't get to come out of Sing Sing to go to the funeral because my nephew messed the process up. And so with Samaritan Village, a counselor suggested to me, "Well, you need to speak to somebody." So what I did is I said, well, the fear was because of my, of that, what I went through in prison. "You're not doping me up." "No, I'm not going to get doped up." So they were like, "No, you can do talk therapy." So I engaged in talk therapy. And that's mainly the most that I've had since I've been home. It's just that instant while I was there with Samaritan Village, and they had a therapist right at the, excuse me, right on site where I went to go participate, and it was and I was proud of myself for doing it and interacting, because I learned some things about myself that I didn't know, and then I also took some suggestions. Even right to this day, I'm just moving to Queens in February. I just got my medical insurance straightened out. I'll probably seek talk therapy again. I really don't want to take any medicines, but some have been suggested, Zoloft, and some other ones, but I negated to take it.
And who suggested that you take those?
The therapist that I was seeing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. So, Will, we are here at the Treatment Not Jail podcast, and the campaign to get the legislatures in the community to understand that prison does not address a person's mental health diagnosis, whether a person has been diagnosed or hasn't been diagnosed. Prison doesn't address a substance use disorder, whether it has been diagnosed or undiagnosed. And people go in prison, as you just said. You went in, you had a drug issue. While you were in there, you continue with that drug issue. When you came out, you brought that drug issue back with you again, unaddressed. They sent you back in twice, basically for the same exact thing, a drug problem that basically was never addressed and or treated. And you said that when you came home, you decided that you wanted to, stop smoking and drinking. What prompted that?
I would say the support of fellow peers and role models that were getting their lives together. That's what gave me the energy to say I want to be like them, even though they went through what I went through. And that's the best I could say, is the role models. And the role models that I knew, guys that had did the same amount of time or more, and were getting on with their lives.
So what would you say now to a public official who says, oh no, those guys are just going to go use that they have a mental health diagnosis or a drug addiction as a get out of jail free card? What would you say to someone that holds that posture?
I would say that first and foremost is that they haven't done their homework. And that's not what I would say to them, but they haven't done their homework, in that I would say to them that there's more to the picture than what meets the eye, and that it takes a concentrated effort by staunch professionals in that field to interact and to find out what makes that person tick, instead of just a blanket thing and just say, them, all of them, like that. Because the mental health piece, as I've watched it in prison and I've watched it now in society, and for now in society, that it's very heinous and very, within the 5 boroughs, the incidents and things that happen, because I watch the news, and I take the subway, I use public transportation. What I see are mentally ill people doing this stuff, for the most part. There may be a percentile that they're just, made a wrong decision, but it's really the mental illness piece is rampant right now. I feel, and somebody needs to really look at it. And people have said, well, yeah, we tried working with him or her, but they just don't want it. But that approach right there is, or that answer is just like crazy, because there's more to it, and it's a time-consuming piece too, to find out what makes this person tick or what their problem is.
So do you think jail is a perfect fit for them?
No, not at all.
Why?
Because you're putting them in an even worse situation, because they may not know how to communicate, they may not know how to use their common sense with the rules and regulations of being, whether you're on Rikers Island or whether you're upstate at Attica. And then what happens is people prey on that when they see a person has a disorder and they can't fend for themselves. So you're throwing them in the lion's den. That's what you're doing.
And then what happens when they complete their time?
So they come out with all the scratches and they go back to what they were doing, you know, what they were doing, what they last knew, or even in rebellion, where if some information got through for them to get their lives together, there's a rebellion because you threw me in here. Now I'm going to like tear things up when I come home. I'm going to get back at you. And I've seen some of those attitudes, and it's really sad, you know, because the pressure that they went through being, you know, thrown in without a, you know, real diagnosis.
Right. In conclusion, Will, do you have anything that you would like to share with, you know, our listeners about, you know, your own life story and or about, you know, this Treatment Not Jail Act?
Sure. I would say that first, let me just give a salute to everyone that's involved with this movement, in that it continues. I would also say to the listeners that if you have anybody in your family or loved ones that suffers, to try to do your best to help them to get treatment, to seek out, to make them better. And lastly, I'm going to just say that for myself, I continue on and know that I am still somewhat institutionalized. Oh, why would you say that? Because that's the truth. Because I got through, but I didn't come through unscathed. The education helped me to rise up and to be a productive member of society, but I still have a lot of scars. Thank you.
And we want to thank you, Will, for being transparent, being vulnerable, sharing your experiences. And again, we want our listeners to understand the importance and the significance of us getting this significant piece of legislation passed through the next session. Mm-hmm. We need treatment, because until we get treatment for the men and women who are suffering mentally, emotionally, and have a substance use disorder, until they're treated, we're just going to just keep this revolving door going in and out, in and out, in and out, waiting for a volcanic explosion. And we have the opportunity now to make the public a safer space. Let's look at our communities. Let's look at our children. Let's look at our families. And let's support and get this piece of legislation, Treatment Not Jail, passed. This way, we will be investing in a safe public environment, a safe public community, and we can address the public health crisis that we're finding ourselves in right now by not supporting and pressing and pushing treatment, not jails. I want to share with you a little bit about what I do, why I do it, and how it aligns with Treatment Not Jail. In 2007, I founded a non-for-profit called the Redemption Center, Inc. And the Redemption Center's sole mission was to provide formerly incarcerated individuals who wanted the opportunity to reestablish, improve, and enhance their lives with the most significant piece of their transition, which was housing. One of the things that drove me to initiate the Redemption Center is that I started processing my own dialogue with brothers that were inside. And one of the things that I noticed is that none of us ever talked about not having a place to go when we were released. And some of us were in there 20, 25, 30 years, family moved, from New York to North Carolina, Virginia, different parts of the country. Brothers and sisters moved off and started their own lives. And basically, we wouldn't talk about the fact that when we came home, we had no place to come. It was shameful, it was embarrassing, and we didn't want to express that vulnerability while inside. And again, after being out, I started noticing how the New York City shelter system was uncontrolled chaos. And basically, one of the things that it did is that it put people who wanted to do right, people who wanted a fair chance, it put them at a disadvantage because now they're in a shelter system that is a facsimile of prison without any control. It was uncontrolled chaos. And then, with all these different mindsets that they had on the inside that basically kept us in fight mode, not flight mode, fight mode, constantly, in fight mode. And when you take us that and you place us in those situations, we automatically are right back in fight mode, despite the fact that we don't want to be in fight mode. But the very nature of the environment that you're casting us in places us in fight mode. So in 2007, I met with a group of brothers. We were actually at a Kwanzaa gathering, February, and we started talking about, what could we do to give back to the community. And when it was all said and done and we got down to the nitty gritty, it was like 3 of us out of 14 that was there. We were able to occupy a space in Brooklyn on Herkimer Street. We went in that environment in 2007. It was crime infested. It was drug infested. And the sad thing is that it was literally across the street from a school. And the kids in this school, I don't think they went higher than the 6th grade. We opened the Redemption Center there. Started bringing brothers there. When we first started, we were doing both men and women. And, just the mere fact of us, again, as a community, formerly incarcerated individuals wanting to impact our community, we not only impacted our community, that the space that we lived in, we affected the entire area. Drugs drifted away. gang activity drifted away. A whole lot of stuff drifted away because we were in the neighborhood and we would speak out against that. And of course, after a while, everyone started learning, those are the OGs, those are the OGs. But we weren't OGs. We were people that made a mess in the community, and we decided that we're going to clean this mess back up. So, be that as it may, again, we cleaned up the community. Gentrification came in. We could no longer afford the rent, and basically it compelled us to shut down. And we shut down for like 2 years, and I got another space in Queens, in Richmond Hill, and I got a church to support me with some startup money to get it started, and we opened the doors back up again in 2019, December. And we've been there throughout the pandemic. We were able to survive the pandemic. We had the capacity for 9 people, but because of COVID, I cut the capacity down in half to 5. And during the entire pandemic, we provided transitional housing for 19 men. None of them went back to prison. None of them caught COVID. And one of the things that I try to do is create a safe space. I was working 7 days a week to ensure that the space remains open. So I would literally pay the rent. I lived next door. My family lived next door. I had a 5-year-old son, 2 daughters, and they're all part of this community because people coming out of prison, they're human beings just like we are. They went in, they did their time, and when we, as a community, we need to welcome them back safely. And the Redemption Center creates a safe space for that. We've also had the opportunity to work with some attorneys for diversion, where people who were trying to get into diversion court, provide housing and supportive services for them. We still help people who are incarcerated, who don't have no space to go to. We provide letters of support and reasonable assurance of housing upon release at our space. When brothers that have been out, that have, maybe got, lost their job, lost their housing, again, lost family, got no place to go. We create a safe space and a safe haven for them. So, when we're talking about treatment, not jail, the fundamental principles of the Redemption Center aligns itself with treatment and not jail, because we believe that if you give a person a safe space where there is no drug activity allowed, there's no violence allowed, and you treat people like human beings, then they will respond like human beings. You treat people with dignity, then they will respond with dignity. You treat people with love, care, and consideration, they will respond with love, care, and consideration. And again, a perfect opportunity is here again. And I just like to go back to William again and allow Will to tell his story of how he got to the Redemption Center and if anyhow has it helped him.
Thank you, Mark. I've been at the Redemption Center since February of this year, coming from long-term treatment in Suffolk County, Long Island. the COVID took my younger sister, so that's the only family that I had. I wasn't living with her. She had a husband, but that was my support. So she was gone, and I have no family here. So after I graduated long-term treatment, I was actually supposed to go to Westchester County, and I had some plans made with some people, but due to the COVID, a lot of the shelters up there weren't receiving. So I was done with treatment, and I wanted to move on. So through a connection from another alumni guy, meaning through the school, Mercy College, pointed me at Mark. Mark and I started a dialogue. Mark said, I got you. So thus, I've been at the Redemption Center since February of this year. It well received me. It gave me all those things that Mark spoke about, so I'm not going to be long-winded. But the point of it is that I'm being treated as a human being. I have no pressures other than to motivate and keep myself going forward with the things that I need to do, whether it be employment, whether it be counseling, whatever's on my plate that I need to do. And he's supportive of it. His wife is supportive of it. His daughters are supportive of it. His young son. The piece of being right next door to them, so it's happened now that that's my family, and I mentor his younger son, which through him allowing it, and engage with him, and it's just a good piece. It's just basically what he said right now: a safe haven and a safe space for me. Had I went to one of the shelters, I wouldn't be talking like this, because although those places provide for people to be there, it's not controlled. It's just chaos. So I'm just going to give a thanks again for Mark for receiving me in February, and I want to just thank him for allowing me to interact with his family, which is a very loving family, and they're all aware of the men that live next door. So it's not a scary piece. It's nothing like that. Actually, for the men folk, he has his son call us uncle, which is Deering, or Mr. And it's a real good piece. As well as Mark working all the hours that he works, he finds time to see us, see what we need. He'll bend over backwards to get what you need, or if he can't get it, he'll give you the connection to get it, and it's most appreciated. Everyone that comes to the Redemption Center is not a good fit. Let me also say this, but I say that in the realm of Mr. Graham having an eye out on people that really want to move forward with their life and creating a space for them. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And the thing with the Redemption Center, again, like Will said, everyone that comes may not be a fit, but I will not deny them the opportunity to come if they're seeking it. The doors is there. The doors are open to everyone. But again, one of the things that we've come to terms with is that despite the fact that the doors is open to everyone, everyone may not be ready to walk into the door. You got to be willing, you got to be ready, you got to be able. And again, we at the Redemption Center, we want to welcome brothers home. We want to welcome them home. And like my family again is right next door. My son is 5 years old. My oldest daughter is 19. My youngest daughter is 14. And I work hard every single day, and I never worry about any harm coming to my family from those men there, because we treat them as human and they respond as human. We treat them with love and they respond with love. And again, the Redemption Center is a nonprofit. We definitely support treatment, not jail. And if you want to really see treatment, not jail, what it looks like the Redemption Center.